Here we go, live.
Made a miss to make him pay. Look at the way he cut the angle on that.
Right, this is a grandma. They out there fighting again.
Battered him with the right hand to the...
Getting Mike frustrated, and Mike able to still break loose with his head movement, miss shots and make him pay. Classic.
Jake Paul finally met his match when he found himself face-to-face with Iron Mike Tyson in the ring.
Mike to the top and bangs him with the left hook right away. And falls towards Mike Tyson. And time is called now, 8-2. Good instructions given by the ref in the early going. Mike gets it with the right hand. He was really nailed with a foot right hand. It's up to 5 and 6. He's not going to make it. Mike Tyson in dramatic fashion knocks out in the early seconds of the first round.
Ladies and gentlemen, the bout ends at 2 minutes 32 seconds of the opening round.
You took it. I knew I hit you with a good shot. You took it. You took it. I respect that.
Jake Paul, a figure who has straddled the worlds of social media fame and professional boxing, entered the ring against Mike Tyson with a swagger that had become his trademark. Known more for his YouTube antics than his boxing prowess, Paul had carved out a controversial career by strategically selecting opponents who, while once formidable, were well past their prime. This tactic allowed him to build a respectable record on paper, but one that many boxing purists viewed as a mockery of the sport. Paul had become infamous for challenging fighters whose best days were behind them, and for whom the physical toll of years of combat had significantly diminished their abilities. This strategy had kept Paul's hype train rolling, but it had also drawn the ire of those who saw through the facade. When Paul announced he would be fighting Mike Tyson, the reaction was a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Tyson, the former heavyweight champion who once terrorized the division with his unmatched ferocity and knockout power, was long retired from competitive boxing. At 58 years old, Tyson was far from his physical prime. But the idea that he was just another old fighter was a grave miscalculation on Paul's part. Tyson's name alone carries a weight that few in the sport could ever match. He was not merely a former champion, he was a symbol of a bygone era of boxing where fear and respect were earned through sheer brutality in the ring. The fight was professionally sanctioned, a decision that raised eyebrows given the age difference and the potential risks involved. The rules were adjusted accordingly. 2-minute rounds instead of the usual 3, in the use of 14-ounce gloves, which are heavier and provide more protection than the standard 10-ounce gloves typically used in professional bouts. These modifications were intended to safeguard both fighters, but as the world would soon learn, no amount of padding could dull the power that Tyson still possessed. As the fight night approached, the buildup was intense. Paul's camp was confident, perhaps overly so, in their assessment of Tyson as an opponent. They believed that the 31-year gap in age, combined with Tyson's long hiatus from competitive boxing, would tilt the scales in their favor. Paul had made a career out of exploiting the vulnerabilities of aging fighters, and this fight was seen as just another step in his carefully curated journey. But what they failed to consider was that Tyson, even in his late 50s, was a fighter whose very instincts were honed to a razor's edge by decades of high-stakes combat. Tyson, on the other hand, approached the fight with the calm demeanor of a man who had nothing left to prove. His legacy was secure, his place in boxing history unassailable. For Tyson, this fight was less about proving his dominance and more about reminding the world of who he was, of what he had been, and of what he could still do when pushed. He trained with a focus and intensity that belied his age, knowing full well that the younger, faster man in front of him might underestimate the depth of his experience and the ferocity that still burned within him. When the two fighters finally stepped into the ring, the contrast between them was stark. Paul, dressed in flashy attire, bounced on his toes, full of youthful energy and confidence. Tyson, in contrast, was a picture of controlled power, his every movement measured and deliberate. The atmosphere in the arena was electric, with fans eager to see whether Paul's bravado would be enough to overcome the legendary Tyson, or if the younger man had finally bitten off more than he could chew. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first round, and immediately it became clear that Paul had made a critical error in judgment. He came out aggressively, as he had in his previous fights, throwing jabs and attempting to establish his reach advantage. But Tyson, with the experience of 1,000 rounds behind him, easily slipped past Paul's punches, moving with a speed and agility that seemed impossible for a man of his age. Within seconds, Tyson had closed the distance, nullifying Paul's reach advantage and putting the younger man on the defensive. Tyson's first few punches were aimed at Paul's body, thudding into his midsection with a force that visibly rattled him. These were not the tentative jabs of an aging fighter. These were the heavy, punishing blows of a man who knew exactly how to break down an opponent. Paul, who had likely expected Tyson to be slower, more tentative, was caught off guard by the older man's aggression. Tyson's punches came in quick, brutal combinations, targeting Paul's ribs and liver, each one designed to sap the younger man's energy and confidence. The early moments of the fight were a masterclass in ring control. Tyson's footwork was impeccable, cutting off the ring and forcing Paul into uncomfortable positions. Every time Paul tried to create distance, Tyson would step in with a vicious body shot or a sharp hook, reminding him that there was nowhere to run. Paul, who had entered the ring full of confidence, was now clearly struggling to keep up with the pace set by Tyson. His punches, which had been sharp and crisp in previous fights, now seemed sluggish and telegraphed. As the first minute of the round ticked by, it became evident that Paul was in over his head. His attempts to land meaningful punches were met with little success, as Tyson's defense proved nearly impenetrable. The younger man's frustration began to show as he threw wild, looping punches that Tyson easily avoided or absorbed without flinching. The gap in skill and experience was becoming more apparent with each passing second. Tyson, sensing Paul's growing desperation, began to press his advantage, pushing the younger fighter back with a relentless barrage of hooks and uppercuts. The turning point of the round came when Tyson, after setting Paul up with a series of body shots, delivered a perfectly timed right hook that caught Paul flush on the chin. The punch was a thing of beauty, a textbook example of Tyson's ability to generate power with frightening efficiency. Paul's head snapped back, his eyes momentarily glazing over as the force of the blow reverberated through his body. He staggered backward, his legs betraying him as he tried to stay upright. The crowd, sensing the end was near, erupted into a deafening roar as Tyson moved in for the kill. With Paul dazed and on the ropes, Tyson unleashed a final, devastating combination. A left hook to the body followed by a right uppercut to the chin sent Paul crashing to the canvas, his body limp and unresponsive. The referee immediately stepped in, waving off the fight before Tyson could land another blow. The knockout was as brutal as it was swift, a reminder that, despite the passage of time, Tyson's power was still something to be feared. The entire fight had lasted just under 2 minutes, a testament to Tyson's enduring prowess and Paul's complete miscalculation of the challenge he had taken on. The aftermath of the fight was a stark contrast to the buildup. Tyson, ever the professional, returned to his corner with the calm demeanor of a man who had simply done his job. There was no gloating, no celebration, just the quiet confidence of a warrior who had proven once again that he was still a force to be reckoned with. Paul, on the other hand, remained motionless on the canvas, the medical team rushing to his side to assess the damage. The knockout had been so severe that it took several minutes for Paul to regain full consciousness. When he finally sat up, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. In the post-fight analysis, the narrative was clear. Jake Paul had underestimated not just Mike Tyson, but the sport of boxing itself. For all his success in manipulating the media and crafting a persona of invincibility, Paul had forgotten that boxing is a sport where shortcuts are exposed and pretenders are humbled. He had cherry-picked his opponents carefully, building a record that looked impressive on paper, but was devoid of true tests. Tyson, however, was no cherry-picked opponent. He was a former heavyweight champion, a man who had spent decades honing his craft, and even at 58, he was capable of delivering a knockout punch that could end a fight in an instant. The fight was a humbling experience for Paul, who had entered the ring with the belief that his youth and athleticism would be enough to overcome Tyson's age and experience. But in the ring, where the truth of a fighter's abilities is laid bare, it was Tyson who stood tall, while Paul was exposed as a man out of his depth. The knockout was a stark reminder that boxing is not a game to be played casually. It is a sport that demands respect, dedication, and above all, an understanding of the craft that only comes with time and experience. As the dust settled, the impact of Tyson's victory began to resonate throughout the boxing world. The fight was not just a victory for Tyson, but a victory for the sport itself, a reaffirmation of the values that have defined boxing for generations. Tyson's performance was a reminder that, even in an era where social media influencers can make headlines by stepping into the ring, the fundamentals of boxing still matter. It is a sport where experience, skill, and power are paramount, and where those who take it lightly do so at their peril. For Paul, the loss was a wake-up call. Up until this point, he had been able to control the narrative, positioning himself as a disruptor in the sport, someone who could bring in new fans and generate interest in a way that traditional boxers could not. But the loss to Tyson shattered that image, revealing the limits of his abilities and the dangers of stepping into the ring with a true professional. It was a humbling experience, one that forced Paul to confront the reality of what it means to be a boxer at the highest level. In the weeks that followed, discussions about the fight dominated sports media. Analysts and fans alike dissected every moment, from Tyson's strategy to Paul's mistakes. The consensus was clear. This was a fight that should serve as a lesson to anyone who thought they could bypass the hard work and dedication that boxing demands. Tyson's performance was hailed as a masterclass in technique, while Paul's defeat was seen as a necessary correction in the trajectory of his career. The knockout had served as a reminder that, despite the influx of celebrity fighters, boxing was still a sport that demanded respect and seriousness. The broader implications of the fight were also a topic of intense debate. Tyson's victory raised questions about the future of his career. Could he continue to compete? Or was this the perfect moment to retire on a high note? Some fans and commentators speculated about potential matchups with other legends of the sport or even against current heavyweight contenders. However, there was also a significant contingent who felt that Tyson had nothing left to prove and that it was time for him to step away from the ring for good. For Jake Paul, the road ahead was uncertain. Despite the loss, his influence outside the ring remained strong. His social media following continued to grow, and his ability to generate buzz around his fights was undiminished. However, the defeat had exposed vulnerabilities in Paul's persona, cracks in the image of the invincible disruptor that he had carefully crafted. If he wanted to continue in the sport, significant changes would be needed, both in his approach to training and in his choice of opponents. The days of cherry-picking fights to build his record were likely over. If Paul was serious about boxing, he would need to face real challenges and prove his worth in the ring. As the dust settled, it became clear that the fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson would be remembered as more than just a one-sided beatdown. It was a clash of eras, a meeting between the old guard and the new, and a moment that crystallized the tensions within the sport of boxing. Tyson's victory was a reminder of the sport's rich history and the importance of respecting its traditions. Paul's defeat, on the other hand, was a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating the complexities and demands of professional boxing. The fight will likely be analyzed and revisited in the years to come, not just for the outcome, but for what it represented. Tyson's performance was a testament to the enduring power of experience and skill, a reminder that age is just a number when it comes to true greatness. Paul's loss, while humbling, could serve as a turning point in his career, pushing him to either dedicate himself fully to the sport or to reconsider his path. Whether this loss would mark the end of Paul's boxing journey or the beginning of a new chapter remained to be seen. In the broader context of the sport, the fight highlighted the ongoing tension between entertainment and competition. The rise of celebrity fighters like Paul had brought new eyes to boxing, but it had also raised questions about the integrity of the game. Tyson's knockout of Paul was a clear message that, while boxing may evolve and change, the core values of the sport, discipline, skill, and respect, must remain intact. It was a reminder that the ring is not a place for shortcuts or gimmicks. It is a place where only the strongest, most skilled, and most dedicated can thrive. The impact of the fight extended beyond just the fighters themselves. It reunited discussions about the direction of boxing as a whole, whether the sport was losing its way amidst the rise of celebrity bouts and spectacle-driven events. Tyson's victory was seen by many as a reassertion of the sport's true essence, a return to what made boxing great in the first place, the clash of skill, will, and power. For purists, it was a satisfying outcome, a reaffirmation that no matter how much the sport might change, the fundamentals would always matter most. In the aftermath, both Tyson and Paul took time to reflect on what the fight meant for their futures. Tyson, ever the professional, seemed content with his performance, but remained non-committal about his plans. Would he fight again, or was this his final farewell? For Paul, the loss was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also presented an opportunity for growth. If he could learn from this experience, if he could dedicate himself to improving his craft, there was still a chance for him to earn the respect that had so far eluded him in the boxing world. As the boxing world moves forward, the fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson will stand as a significant moment in the sport's history. It was a reminder that, despite the allure of fame and fortune, boxing is a sport that demands respect, dedication, and above all, a deep understanding of the craft. Tyson's victory was a celebration of those values, while Paul's defeat served as a stark reminder of what happens when those values are ignored. The fight may have been brief, but its impact will be felt for years to come, shaping the narratives of both fighters and the sport as a whole. In the end, the legacy of this fight will be one of contrast, between youth and experience, between hype and reality, and between the old and the new. Tyson, with his decades of experience, showed that true greatness is not something that can be manufactured or faked. It is earned through years of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. Paul, for all his success outside the ring, was reminded that in boxing, there are no shortcuts to greatness. The lessons of this fight will resonate long after the final bell has rung, serving as a reminder of what it takes to succeed in one of the most demanding sports in the world. As the sport of boxing continues to evolve, the fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson will be remembered as a pivotal moment, a clash that brought together two very different worlds, and in doing so, highlighted the enduring truths of the sport. Tyson's knockout of Paul was more than just a victory, it was a statement about the nature of boxing itself. In a sport where fame can sometimes overshadow skill, Tyson's performance was a powerful reminder that in the end, it is the fighters who dedicate themselves to the craft who will stand the test of time. For those who witnessed the fight, whether in person or on screen, it was a night to remember, a night when the past and the present collided in a way that few could have predicted. Tyson's victory was a reaffirmation of his legendary status, while Paul's defeat was a moment of reckoning. As both fighters move forward, the lessons of that night will continue to shape their careers and the sport they both inhabit. In the world of boxing, where every punch tells a story, the tale of Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson is one that will be told for generations to come.